Each year, the APRA Board of Directors acknowledges the lifetime contributions of an outstanding member or members of the Australian music industry. This award is named in memory of the late Ted Albert, former APRA chairman and pioneer, entrepreneur and producer. To present this year's award, please welcome the Managing Director of Sony ATV Music Publishing, Damien Trotter.
As a fan of nearly 40 years, a colleague for 35 of those years and a friend for much of that time, it's my enormous pleasure, and can I say, to paraphrase Rupert Murdoch, possibly the humblest day of my working life, to be up here tonight presenting the 2018 Ted Albert Music Award to the mighty, incomparable Midnight Oil. I started working at CBS Records, as it was back then in the early 80s, between the release of Place Without a Postcard and 10 to 1. But even back then, before things really took off for the band and I knew nothing about nothing, I could see that the Oils were different to all other artists on the roster. They weren't to be messed with. They were an enigma. I think it's fair to say that definitely back in those days, in the balance of power between artists and record companies, the labels very much held the whip hand, but this was never the case with Midnight Oil. Whilst it was a mutually respectful relationship, they wrote the rules. They alone decided what they would or wouldn't do, like not performing on the all-powerful Countdown as it involved lip-syncing, or knocking back the invitation to perform Beds Are Burning to tens of millions at the Grammys at the height of their success, because it happened to clash with an Indigenous right event at Bondi Beach that they'd committed to several months earlier. Needless to say, the US record company weren't quite so understanding. They completely freaked out and demanded the band attend. Dennis, no doubt, also quietly wept a few tears at what must have seemed a massive lost opportunity. But all credit due, he backed the band and their decision 100% then and has backed them ever since. Cutting their teeth throughout the late 70s and 80s in the pubs and clubs of the city's suburbs and regional areas, alongside the likes of AC/DC, Cold Chisel, Hunters and Collectors, In Excess, the Divinyls, Hoodoo Gurus, etc. It was a very blokey, boozy, testosterone-charged environment. But anathema to this, there was always this unspoken compact between the Oils and their fans, where it was understood that while band and audience would go very, very hard, any drunken violence or harassment towards women just wasn't going to be on, and would be met with Pete immediately shutting down the gig mid-song and booting out the offender. Or if it was some pumped-up security goon getting too heavy-handed with a boisterous fan, I've seen him kick out the security guard as well. There is no more ferocious or intimidating live experience than Midnight Oil in full flight. An Oils concert is a fully immersive, physical, intellectual and emotional experience. It's never a simple night out of passive entertainment, and as those of us fortunate enough to have caught them on any of their most recent shows would agree, that hasn't simply diminished one iota over the years. Their performances simply defy the laws of nature, or at the very least, the 7 signs of aging. They have a unique alchemy and are a truly three-dimensional beast that exists beyond the recordings and live performances of their brilliant songs. They actually deliver on the issues they write about in their songs through their ceaseless, largely behind-the-scenes activism, as well as the countless direct actions on the front line, stopping minds and changing minds, actually pushing the work, the message and the political values out into the world, whether it's attacking the corporate greed and contempt for our natural environment, in the case of Exxon, the current actions they're taking to stop the Adani mine, or shining a harsh and uncomfortable light on the systemic and tragic realities of the Indigenous disadvantage, particularly in remote communities. They don't just pontificate like so many others do, they get out there and do it. Case in point, and like so many of you I'm sure, I'll never forget the feeling of pride where at the closing ceremony of the 2000 Olympic Games, where the Oils went off script and completely rogue, changing into their now famous sorry suits just 2 minutes before being led down to perform to a worldwide audience of over 1 billion people. This singular act of subversion, taking matters into their own hands to highlight the very real pain and ongoing suffering visited upon the stolen generation not only galvanised the vast majority of Australians, but also served to enlighten millions around the world to our government's refusal to take meaningful steps towards reconciliation or just simply do the right thing. And watching John Howard's face full screen in the VIP box, betraying all the emotions of an Easter Island statue, was probably just another bonus for them. There may have been bigger bands and artists as far as sales and chart success to have come out of Australia, but in terms of what they represent, the combined social impact of their songs, along with their activism where the rubber actually meets the road, there has never been a more important band for me. They sit alongside The Clash, Public Enemy, Rage Against the Machine, NWA, Nina Simone, Bob Marley and Bob Dylan as genuine agents of change who have provoked and challenged our thinking on so many important issues and actually reshaped our society in a way that only great art and great artists can. And I think it's fair to say that through them and their contemporaries, such as Archie Roach, Paul Kelly and Kev Carmody, the baton has been passed down to the likes of AB Original, along with a whole generation of fierce young women like Camp Cope, Stella Donnelly, Sampa and others who are also calling out societal inequality, are also mad as hell and aren't going to take it anymore. I just wish I had more time to speak at greater length about each of the Oils individually, their staggering musicianship and almost telepathic understanding as a unit, their dedication to the craft of songwriting, the astonishing show must go on physical resilience that got them on stage every night of their recent international tour, in spite of some truly gruesome illnesses and serious injuries that would have seen most bands cancel gigs without hesitation. All that makes them the band that we see on stage. But in Rob, Jim, Martin, Pete and Bones, and I'm sorry, Bear, you departed before I got to know you, you seriously couldn't meet 5 more intelligent, articulate, humble, creative, passionate, or decent men of real conviction. They are very different people with different temperaments, strong personalities, and even stronger opinions. And as such, will clash from time to time, but these differences are the fuel that stokes the fire that drives them forward. They use it and rely upon it to prevent complacency or inertia ever creeping into anything they do or decisions they collectively make. For all that, they are truly a band of brothers, and informing everything they do is the respect they have for each other, for their fans, and their deep and genuine desire to enact real change and improve our society. And that's what makes them unique, and that's what makes them Midnight Oil.
In the pantheon of Australia's greatest artists, few can match the impact made by Midnight Oil. Since forming on Sydney's northern beaches in the 1970s, this 5-piece has become renowned worldwide for their rock anthems, fiery stage presence and dedication to social justice. Add a string of chart-topping albums and industry accolades, and you have one of the most iconic bands in Australian history. In their earliest days, Midnight Oil's raw pub rock sound went against the grain of the local pop charts. Support from commercial radio stations was non-existent, and they refused to mime on the TV shows of the time. They did things their own way, or they didn't do them at all. Their uncompromising attitude, independently released records, and constant gigging earned them a rabid local fan base. In 1982, the Oils had their first taste of serious commercial success with the release of their classic 10 to 1. This innovative album remained in the Australian charts for more than 200 weeks, and its fierce criticism of militarism and consumerism established them as a band that wasn't afraid to tackle political issues head-on. 1986 saw Midnight Oil and the Warumpi Band touring through some of Central Australia's most isolated desert communities. The Blackfella Whitefella tour was transformative for the Oils, exposing them to the beauty of the Australian outback and the horrendous living conditions in remote areas. This experience inspired the band's 6th studio album, Diesel and Dust. Selling more than 6 million copies globally, It exposed the issues facing Indigenous Australians. The album received 3 ARIA Awards and was listed at #1 in the book 100 Best Australian Albums. More than 20 years later, the US Rock and Roll Hall of Fame named Beds Are Burning one of their 500 songs that shaped rock and roll. Midnight Oil's newfound international fame provided a larger platform for their activism, attracting worldwide attention to nuclear disarmament, apartheid and environmental issues. After the catastrophic Exxon oil spill, the band's protest gig outside Exxon's Manhattan headquarters made global headlines. The 90s saw the release of 4 more studio albums, with the international hit Blue Sky Mining confirming the band's commitment to social, environmental and political change. They took on Hansonism with their incendiary Redneck Wonderland and drew focus to the plight of East Timor. In 2000, they reignited global discussions about Indigenous reconciliation when they performed at the closing of the Sydney Olympic Games with the word sorry emblazoned on their clothing. After a 15-year hiatus, the band reunited in 2017 for the 7-month Great Circle World Tour. The 70 sold-out shows were emblematic of their whole career. The tour kicked off in Sydney pubs before taking the world by storm and returning home for 2 unforgettable shows at Sydney's Domain. Undiminished by the years, the band spoke out against Trumpism. They performed for Greenpeace in Rio Harbour aboard the Rainbow Warrior and exposed the risks to the Great Barrier Reef from the proposed Adani coal mine. In an age of political and environmental uncertainty, the tour marked the return of a vital artistic voice. Their career has garnered 11 ARIAs, 9 platinum albums, 2 Grammy nominations, inductions into the ARIA Hall of Fame, and countless other accolades. However, the band's influence goes well beyond those awards. The power of their music and the passion of their activism have helped shape what it means to be an Australian. Tonight, it is our tremendous pleasure to acknowledge this influence by awarding Midnight Oil the 2018 Ted Albert Award for Outstanding Services to Australian Music.
This award has become one of the most important and prestigious honours that can be bestowed upon any individual or artist in this country. And all of those who have received it have unquestionably made an enormous contribution to our industry. Few, if any, though, have made quite the impact and contributed outstanding services in the way that this band have. It's my great pleasure to come to the stage. Martin, Rob, Jim, Bones, Bear, Midnight Oil.
The darkest years, the roaring years, the fallen years. These shall not be forgotten years. The hardest years, the wildest years, the desperate and divided years. We will remember. Not be forgotten years.
You boys talk for as long as you fucking like.
Thanks so much, Damien. That was an amazing, it was beyond a speech, wasn't it? Thanks so much, Damien. Some say you're judged by the company you keep. If that's true, and if that company includes past Ted Albert Award winners such as Jimmy Little, Slim Dusty, Archie Roach, Paul Kelly, Lindy Morrison and Cold Chisel, then that perhaps explains why we're feeling so special tonight. The Ted Albert Award is not one which lionises Australia's biggest selling artists or rewards those whose songs have had the most hits and downloads. It's about those who've had success, sure, but who've then given back. Back to their fans by remaining accessible and real, back to their peers by celebrating others' achievements, and back to the industry support networks by assisting those most in need. But there's another thread which binds Ted Albert Award winners. It's a passion for our country and a gift for describing it. It's an understanding of the uncommon beauty and fragility of this land we share with the First Nations, the first Australians. And it's an urgent desire to protect and enhance what we have today for the generations to follow. That's why crazy new reef-threatening coal mines in Queensland, water theft for cotton farms from the once mighty Darling River, and coal seam gas mining in precious deep soil agricultural areas, these all have to be resisted with strong words and direct action. Preferably accompanied by thundering guitars, bass and drums. Our connection with Alberts began in 1978 when we recorded our first self-titled album at Boomerang House in King Street, Sydney, with Double J's Keith Walker producing and George and Harry kicking us out every morning after our frantic midnight to dawn sessions. 9 years and about 700 gigs later, we were back at Alberts, this time at Neutral Bay, to track songs inspired by our Blackfella Whitefella tour with the Warumpi Band. Like our world tour last year, tonight's award feels like the linking of a great circle. We're delighted to be once again invited into the venerable home of the Easy Beats and AC/DC, the Angels and Rose Tattoo, and so many other great Australian artists. Thank you.
Following up from Rob's remarks, it's up to me to give thanks and express our very real gratitude to APRA for the good work that you do, and especially for the honour that's been conferred on us tonight with this award. We actually want to give thanks across the decades, and we begin with our absent parents and elders, the mentors, the visible and the invisible ones, the ones who deposited stuff in our genes, who bestowed in our hearts the love of making music and produced this mysterious amalgam of imagination and character that allows us to become people of creativity and expression, and gave us the opportunity to be in a band, and it truly doesn't get much better than this. To our wives and partners and children, the word support doesn't really do justice. You should call it enduring, unwavering. And here with us tonight, Leslie Holland, Annette Featherston, Christabel Blackman and Doris Rakono-Garrett. Thanks also to our broader family, relatives, friends, colleagues, former bass players Andrew James, who's here tonight, Rickenbacker and Peter Gifford on Fender. A special thanks from me for Jim and Robert, particularly for great songs to sing and the spirit of cooperation that enabled us to together produce so much music over so many years. To those who were there early in particular and who've been in for the long haul, to paraphrase an expression that my colleague here, Tony Burke, knows well, you are the true believers. Fans, writers, journos, broadcasters, and quickly remember, as we saw in memoriam, our great supporter and friend Stuart Matchett from Double J and later Triple J, who passed away recently. Good on you, Stewie. The producers, Keith Walker and then Les Karski, Nick Launay and Warren Livesey, each who came back for more than one record. Our first agent and first publisher, Chris Plimmer and John Bromwell, and those at the original 7 Records when we set up our Powderworks label. We do want to acknowledge our first manager, Gary Morris, who some in this room will still remember. His vision, especially in the infant years, made our journey less arduous than it otherwise would have been. To Zev Isaac, now in Israel, who picked up the reins at one point as we headed to London to bag heads with A&M Records and came back stony broke. No surprises there, but with Place Without a Postcard under our arms. Like any band or artist who reaches out to play and tour, we owe much to the efforts of many skilled technicians, sound and lighting engineers, tour managers and crew, the people who really do enable the shows. Again, too many to mention by name, but John Vasey and Michael Lippold deserve recognition for giving all and willingly meeting the high standards that we set. More big thanks to those who've kept the good ship Midnight Oil afloat in smooth and sometimes stormy weather, including long-time office manager Arlene Brooks, previously Arlene, she's there. Previously Diana Lindsay and Stephanie Lewis, lawyer Peter Thompson, accountant and occasional tour manager Craig Allen, and publicist Paula Jones, also with us tonight. To the Sonnies, ATV and Music, Damien Trotter, our publisher, who we trust and respect. Thank you, Dames, particularly for your remarks tonight. I'll remember the Rupert Murdoch line forever. But as everyone here knows, only too well, it's often writers' royalties that keep people alive, particularly in the lean years. And to Dennis Hanlon and the Sonny crew. Dennis, we're in our 36th plus year together, and I think that alone is amazing. No matter the ups and downs, and there's been no shortage, or our different perspectives on, well, just about everything, we enjoy something rare in the business. It's called reciprocal loyalty, and it is priceless. Lastly, to John Watson and Melissa Chenery and the team at 11, now taking care of business. The Great Circle 2017 has been our most successful tour, certainly in our memory, and certainly one of the most enjoyable as well. Peerlessly executed. What else is there to say? Only a little bit. Making music, as all of you in this room know, isn't a zero-sum game. We make it and we share it with others. And from our earliest days, as the chrysalis of modern Australian popular music was becoming a bit bigger butterfly, and we were just a bunch of scruffy kids set up on the tiled floor of a rough pub in the suburbs playing loud and fast as if our lives depended on it, and they probably did. From the remote realms of the Western Desert, with first Australians looking on from a safe distance, to peace concerts in Central Park, New York, and every other joint imaginable. Whenever and wherever we've played, we've been showered with a gift, the gift of joining up with others, experiencing that primal connection that comes from making and sharing music. So thanks are due here too. Now, it's said that cynicism is the last refuge of the moral coward, and I think it's true. And whilst we could be strongly opinionated, perhaps even sanctimonious at times, and given that fashion modes are in opposition to our primary instincts, we're intractable in wanting to do what we do, in wanting to play the way that we play, in wanting to express ourselves the way that we always have. I hope on occasions like this that our partnership is seen as musicians expressing our love of country, our reading of history, our sense of injustice, and so on, through songs, ideas, images, campaigns, and hopefully in each and every performance without reservation. It is a fact that we still live in a lucky country, but in a country and a world where there is much unfinished business. We still prostrate ourselves pathetically before the English crown and deny Aboriginal and Islander people a voice and real justice for the act of English dispossession. The planet is on fire. There are a sea of troubles to oppose, and there always regretfully will be. Yet, as songwriters and performers, we have experienced the incalculable privilege of being free. As the artists of today and tomorrow must also be free. Free to create, free to imagine, free to dream, free to express ourselves even if others don't agree, free to get out and make music. And for Jem and Martin and Bones and Rob and myself, we're very grateful for tonight's award. We're still standing. While there's life, there's hope. And as someone once wrote, given that hope is what you say and do, we wanted to say thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Midnight Oil. Isn't he good at making speeches? He should go into...